संस्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. So in the last class, we started with the first sutra of the Narada Bhakti Sutra. As we have already discussed in the introduction, that there are 84 sutras. And the first sutra, what it speaks, it says, Atha Atha Bhaktim Vyakhyāsyāmaha. So its meaning is now, therefore, the description of bhakti starts, ensues. So this now, therefore, what it means? That as we were indicating in the last class, it signifies that we have somehow started the filling of the need of God in our life. That's the basic qualification. We need not have extreme renunciation, nor we are too attached to the worldly life. Maybe it is because of some crisis in life, this artha, or jigyashu, we have developed some curiosity to know about the spiritual dimension of our existence, or it may be artharthi, it may be because of some worldly ambitions, or it may be like a jnani, the one who has realized the absolute, and in spite of the fact that they have realized, holding on to the divine, they have at last reached the state of ultimate realization. But from there they want to come down and remain in the state of this you and me, in the state of devotion. They want to maintain that duality and enjoy the bliss of devotion. They are the jnani. So they are the best. All other categories at last has to ripen into jnani. That is the best among all. God says that He is the one who is the dearest of me. But whatever may be the reason, that I have felt the need of God in my life, and that's the basic and only qualification. Like as we see in the path of jnana, in the path of karma, that lot of prerequisites are required. That I have to be established in vairagya, I should have discrimination, viveka, and all this samadhamadi shat sampatti, the 6 treasures in the form of shamadama, uparati titiksha, shraddha samadhana. So those all details we find has been spoken of in the jnana marga. And mukshutvam, intense yearning for God. So here, the prerequisites are very simple. That somehow, even if it's very little, I have developed a devotion for the divine. With this alone, this emotion, when it is nurtured, when it is nourished and channelized in proper way, then it can lead to the overwhelming devotion which finds expression as a spontaneity in the life of a devotee. So that's the thing which this Bhakti Shastra will speak of, the science of devotion. So the entire science is what? That somehow that this emotion which I have developed for the divine, it instead of being destructive should become productive and fruitful. To give an example, just say for an example like hunger. When I am hungry, this can be channelized in such a way that I just resort to nourishing food, proper time in this, I can take the food throughout the day. I know that whenever it's the time to take food, I take it in proper time, and that also I take nourishing food. That's how I can regulate my hunger. Or I can just resort to some junk foods. So this hunger, if it is not regulated properly, if it is not nourished properly, it can result in destruction, ill health, all diseases, lifestyle diseases, all ensues from that. The same hunger, when it is regulated through proper diet, nourishing diet, and that also in controlled manner, that can result in a good health. So similarly, this emotion is a faculty which we all have. How we channelize it, how we discipline it, on that depends whether that it is going to give us fulfillment, joy, happiness in life, or it's going to lead us to some very complicated relations and complicated destructive situations in life. So we all understand that. So here, this is the science of this developing and nurturing that emotion so that it can find some spiritual channel and ultimately leading us to that ultimate fulfillment in life. So now the next sutra onwards, Narada Bhakti Sutra, will be enunciating this science to regulate and spiritualize our emotions. So now we will enter the second sutra, which is like the keynote address. So it will define the theme of the entire Narada Bhakti Sutra. So it is like the keynote address based on which all the remaining sutras will be explained, elaborated and enunciated. So now let's enter into the second sutra. The second sutra, what it is saying? Sa tu asmin parama prema rupa. So what is that bhakti? That sa here indicates that bhakti. That bhakti is what? Asmin. This word asmin is very important. Here, no particular form of divinity has been mentioned. That, like in Bhagavatam, they say that it is a bhakti for Krishna. If you go to any Shiva Purana, bhakti for Shiva. But here we find a very nice word has been used. Asmin. Asmin means this, to this. This sa tu asmin parama prema rupa. That the supreme love for it. It's a very neuter term, that asmin. For it, asmin indicates something very near to us. So, just see the universality of this term asmin. Its first significance is that it indicates something very near. It's not far off. That as in the initial stage of our devotion, sometimes we feel that God is far, far away, sitting behind the clouds in the sky, in the heaven. So here the word asmin actually speaks of antaratma. He is very near, here and now. He is the soul of my soul. He is residing in my heart. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say very nicely, he used to say, Bhaktir Hriday Bhagavanir Boithakkana. Very nice. This expression, when we read it casually. We generally don't realize the inner meaning of what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. Bhaktir Hriday Bhagavanir Boithakkana. Boithakkana means living room. So in my house, in your house, you have the access to each and every corner of your house. Anywhere you can go. As per the need, as per the time, any space, I have the access. But when a guest comes, it is the living room where I meet him. So when Sri Ramakrishna is saying that Bhakti Hriday Bhagavanir Boithakkana, the devotee's heart is God's living room. What it indicates? That God is all-pervading. He is permeating the entire existence. But he meets with his devotee in the devotee's heart. That is the living room. Bhakti Hriday Bhagavanir Boithakkana. So he is everywhere, but the meeting point with the devotee is the heart of the devotee. So this heart is being spoken of as asmin. That's the first thing. Even in our Upanishads, they say, Hridayena hi janati. That the highest realization happens by the awakening of the heart. Hridayena hi janati. As all the spiritual truths is revealed in the heart. As has been spoken of again in the Upanishad, that Angushtamatra Purusha, Jananang Hridaye Sannivishtaha. He is just the size of a thumb sitting in the heart of each and every being. Angushtamatra Purusha, Jananang Hridaye Sannivishtaha. He is just the high size of a thumb, Angushtamatra. So what's the idea? That he is felt. We will find that when we feel the love in our heart, most probably we have not yet developed love for the divine, but we have love for our relations. And if you're aware of the center of the love, you'll find it is situated in a very small space in the center of your heart. That's where the devotion has to be cultured. This Angushtamatra Purusha. So, this is the first significance of the word Asmin. The second significance is something which speaks of the Catholicity. That instead of speaking of any particular deity, any particular form of divinity, whether it is Rama, Krishna, or Divine Mother, or Shiva, nothing as such. Asmin means neuter. This in it, the devotion for the one, for it, devotion for it. It's a neuter, iha, Asmin. So here we find that in the Hindu tradition, the concept of Ishta is there. That as per my temperament, as per my liking, as per the way I have been brought up, the family tradition, I will find that I have an inclination, a love, a devotion for a particular form of the deity, of the highest spiritual principle, which is being symbolized, which finds, we won't say symbolized, it actually manifests through that deity. It's a living presence there in the deity. As we were saying that God pervades everywhere, but his manifestation, special manifestation, is there in certain things of this world. So the deity is the Archavatar, that where the people worship, the form in which all the peoples will be worshipping, in that form, as per our devotion, God manifests there. So Asmin speaks of that concept of Ishta. It's not any particular form of the divinity. Any form of divinity, as per my birth, as per my upbringing, as per my liking, as per my temperament, the little love for whatever form of the divinity I have developed, Asmin speaks of that. You can continue with that. So it speaks of that universality, the Catholicity of the Narada Bhakti Sutra. Now comes that after understanding the word Asmin, the next term which we find is Parama Prema Rupa. Sa, the devotion, to specific. It's tu is used in the sense of specific. Know it for certain that that devotion is what? Is Parama Prema Rupa. Is love, devotion, which is supreme for that. That in one way it signifies the thing which is centered in your heart, and that can be any form of divinity. And that love is supreme, this Parama Prema Rupa. This Parama is very important word here. That what it means, that is different. Bhakti is different from any ordinary love. All ordinary love, if it is Prema, then it is Parama Prema. How it is different? It is different both quantitatively as well as qualitatively. That as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, that what this love for God is like, that the three types of emotion which we find is very intense. This a child's love for the mother, a chaste wife's love for the husband, these are very intense love. or a miserly person's love for his wealth, if you combine them, that we think these love, nothing can excel this love. Sri Ramakrishna is saying that divine love is more intense than that. If you can combine the intensity of these three love, then most probably you can somehow have an idea what love for the divine is. So it is extremely, this quantity, as far as the quantity is concerned, it is very intense. So what it speaks of, that it speaks of that this development of this little love to that intense love, when it ripens into that intense love, then only it can be termed as the bhakti. Bhakti means now it has ripened. Though it has started with an initial small love, it has ripened to that. How to ripen that? That's the science which we will be studying throughout the Bhakti Sutra. That the first thing we should always understand, that the little devotion which we have, at the beginning, it has to be directed by our resolution, willpower. You will find that as a human being, we have this faculty, we have this quality to regulate our emotion, to guide our emotion with resolution, with a willpower. No other creature have. It is just an instinctual for them. But we as a human being have the capacity to guide our emotions with a resolve, with a willpower. You'll find in every field of life, a player is passionate about his game. An Olympian, this Olympic participant is passionate about all the forms of sports. But what we will find, first he is taking certain oath that it should be guided by these principles. A doctor passionate about his practice, he also first takes some oaths. A politician takes some oath. What it speaks of? That a politician is passionate about politics. But that passion, that liking has to be guided by certain principles. So this is the faculty which we use even for nurturing the devotion. The little love which I have developed, to really enkindle it, it has to be guided by resolution, willpower. What's that? That whether I like it or not, that little devotion which I have developed, every day it has to be practiced through some repetitive practices, again and again. Be it some ritual, be it the repetition of the name of the Lord, whatever it may be, it has to be done again and again and again. As we find it has been spoken of in the sutra, in some succeeding sutra, that even in Bhakti Shastras, that bhaktya sanjayate bhakti, all the practices of bhakti, that at last gets ripened into spontaneous bhakti. As we were studying, when we were studying the Bhagavatam, there also we study the same thing, that all the preparatory bhakti, that ripens into raganuga bhakti. That speaks of the spontaneity. So here, that's the idea, bhaktya sanjayate bhakti, that to have that intense devotion, which speaks of that tremendous quantity of emotion. For that, it has to be practiced at the beginning. So, if we find even in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is mentioned very nicely that how to develop that intense devotion. Ei horinam nite nite bhakti mukul fudibechite. That's the only way. Just go on taking the name of the Lord. Ei horinam nite nite bhakti mukul. At present, most probably bhakti is just in the form of a bud in my heart. It will blossom. Go on taking the name, and at last it will blossom. It speaks of that repetitive practice with resolution. Whether I like it or not, I have to go on doing it again and again. So this is the thing for the quantitative, for increasing the quantity of our emotion, the intensity of our emotion. this repetitive practice is very important. As we have said again and again, is actually our mind is made in such a way that what we do repeatedly, again and again, that as if creates a path in the mind. And once the path is created, the necessity for doing it we forget. Just to do it becomes our liking. All our this love, all our obsessions have developed that way. That in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, as we say again and again, that what we will find again and again, Sri Ramakrishna is saying, Kamini, Kanchani, Maya. That lust and gold is Maya. These two have become, why it is Maya? Because it has become something like an obsession for us. How it has become obsession? Now we will find that from a small microbe to the human being, what is the common thing? That everyone wants to survive. For surviving, I need food. Basic thing. Without food, no one can. From a small bacteria to the human being, to sustain, it needs some resource, it needs some food. So this liking, this want, this need, as we have practiced repeatedly again and again, again and again, again and again, it has become instinctual. Now we forget the necessity. As a human being, what has happened? With all our wealth, what we resort to a lifestyle where we find that we are sometimes, most of the time, what we are doing, that we are abusing, that we are having the food habit which speaks of our obsession. It results in at last ill health. And then another thing, that even a small bacteria knows that however it may try, it cannot live through eternity. So it wants to continue. How? By procreation. That okay, I may die, but I continue to live through my descendants, through my progenies. I continue to live through them. So this also is a necessity. But as we have pursued through all forms of life, through millions of years, so various life cycle, that again has become something like an obsession. It has created a path in my mind. And that's why Sri Ramakrishna is saying Kamini, Kanchan. Kamini speaks of lust and Kanchan speaks of gold. All the means to attain the things for my sustenance. That's the goal. These are Maya. Why they are Maya? I forget the necessity. And they have become my obsession. Tremendous attachment for them. I like them. So, this is the basic psychology behind developing all sorts of obsessions. Tremendous attachment, which is again associated with emotion. You will find that the two basic things as we were speaking of, this Kamini, Kanchan, these are without which life cannot exist at all. But again, you will find not a single crime which at last cannot be described by either of these two. Why? Because at last the thing which is necessity has got converted into obsession. Because of repeated pursuing, by pursuing it repeatedly, it has created a path in the deep groove in the mind, and now we forget the necessity. Just to pursue it has become our tremendous liking, and that liking is associated with this various emotions. So, all the religious tradition you will find that what we believe, what are the ultimate principles in which we believe, that may vary. But there are some things which are very common in all the religion. In all the religion you will find they speak of repetitive practice. What I am practicing, that may be different, but whatever I am practicing, that is repetitive. Whether it is a Christian, whether it is a Muslim, whether it is a Hindu, any denomination, you will find that as per our spiritual practices are concerned, it is something which speaks of repetitive practice. Whether it is prayer, whether it is japa, whether it is ritualistic worship, the same thing we do again and again. So what's the science behind it? That all the religions understood the power of repetition. that what I repeat, that creates as if a groove in my mind, and then I just get obsessed by it. Just to travel through that groove becomes my obsession. So here also, that bhaktya sanjayate bhakti, all those practices, when I with a resolution, the little devotion which I have developed, that I am nurturing with a resolution. There's all those practices I do again and again and again, and then at last I find that the devotion is developing. And once it develops, very interesting thing happens. Once it's developed, it becomes more and more intense. The more you pursue, the more it becomes intense. So that's the thing which we find, and it's something, once you get it, you never lose it. That's why in Bhagavad Gita, it's mentioned that swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Just practice a little. It will save you from the great danger. Once you develop this devotion will help you to develop that spiritual resilience by which you can face the challenges of life in a much more detached way, because you have already developed that tremendous love for the divine. So just to practice a little. Swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. It will help you to transcend the great fear in life in the form of trials and tribulations. This idea we find Sri Ramakrishna is explaining with the help of an allegory in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. What he's saying? He's giving a very nice example. Just think of a stream coming up from the mountain. It is falling on the valley, and after it comes down to the valley, it breaks into two streams. So the one stream breaking into two rivers, as one river, but it has a bend. So it becomes like a U structure. Now Sri Ramakrishna is saying that suppose someone is trying to row a boat from one of the legs of that U structured stream. First he has to go uphill. It entails a lot of endeavor. He has to use his full strength to row the boat against the flow. And then he comes to the junction point where the stream has just come down and has broken into two. He comes to the junction, and the moment he crosses the junction, now the flow becomes favorable. Now the boatman, what he will do? He will just hold the row to keep his direction proper, but there is no effort required. Most probably he's sitting and just relaxing and smoking a hubble bubble. That's what Sri Ramakrishna says. Just relaxing. So what it speaks? The same thing. That with all our practice, we somehow have to reach a state from where the flow ensues, the spontaneity ensues. So that speaks of the quantity. Thus, and then the quality. This quantity, again, as so many times we have mentioned, it's so nicely expressed in Mirabai's bhajan. One of these lines are there. This treasure which you develop, once you develop, what happens? It can never be expended. Kharche nahi koi, chor na leve. It's a very different type of wealth, as it is something intrinsic. All other our likings is something extrinsic. It's dependent on something apart from me. So as long as I have not attained it, the fear is there, I may not get it. And once I have attained it, again the fear is there, I may lose it. Whether it is wealth, whether it is relationship, whether it is position in life, for all that, this fear is always there. Till I get it, the fear is there, I may not get it, and once I get it, I may lose it. But this devotion is such, once you get it, it is intrinsic, it is within you. No one can take it away from you. As a result, the more you practice, it is always with you. The more the groove in your mind gets deepened, and the more intense becomes your love for God. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna says that Tintan ek hole tobe Ishwar love hoy. That intensity, to express the intensity of that love, as we were saying, that this intensity is so intense. It is just by adding the three most intense love as we experience as a human being. This a mother's love for the child, the chaste wife's love for the husband, and a miserly person's love for the wealth. Add up these three, that intense it becomes, and then only it can enter in the final supreme devotion, which speaks of Parabhakti, the supreme devotion. So this speaks of the quantity. Now what is the quality? So now, as this love is not selfish, as there is no sense of possession, so there is no stress, just as we were saying, related to yoga and kshema. So it is something which I am growing within, something intrinsic. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Chand mama, shokoler mama. That is very interesting, that God is something universal. You will find in our day-to-day life that if I love someone and I find the one whom I love, someone else also loves him, and that love is reciprocated to some other person, we develop a sense of jealousy, tremendous jealousy. Why? Because here the love is being directed to something external. It's like that, as we say, that it's like just passing through the traffic. If I get green signal, the others are bound to get red signal. In any job, there are only 10 vacancies, but 100 applicants. So 90 won't get it, 10 will get it. But here, as it is something intrinsic, the same love of God which you develop through your practice, someone else also develops, without in any way affecting our love for the divine. So this love for the divine is something very universal. There is no question of this enmity. It actually speaks of brotherhood. You will find that when I develop love for God, someone else develop love for God, I feel as if we are related. And that relation is even more strong than biological relation. In all the spiritual traditions you will find, it gives a tremendous sense of identity. So it's very, very universal, because it is something intrinsic. So as this feeling of this divinity is attached to such devotion, it results, there are two factors for this quality. That all other loves are something extrinsic, this is something intrinsic. As a result, there is no question of losing it at any point of time. Once I gain it, it is always with me. That's one thing. And the other thing is, this love creates a sense of awe, which is something very, very unique for the divine love. In all other forms of love, there's a question of, it's something very, very physical, you can say, biological. The mother's love for the child. When the mother is loving the child, it is only her own child. She doesn't feel the same way for the other's children. But here, this devotion is very, very universal. Why? Because it creates a type of awe, that we all know that the divine is something which transcends all the human limitation. And this faculty of awe is something which is inherent in us. It has to be nurtured. If you don't nurture it, it can get distorted in various ways. In our scriptures, they say very nicely that why we have that faculty of awe? Because we cannot help without thinking of infinity. That we as a human being have to think of something which is beyond all limitations. Very nicely in the scriptures it has been mentioned, Sa Anantaya Kalpate. We can never think anything as limited. If I say that is the galaxy which the science has found as the extent of our universe, with our mind I can still traverse further And we do that. We can never think of a limit. Whenever you speak of a limit with the mind, we just think of something which is beyond that. Why it happens? It happens because the scriptures say that our real nature is infinite. Because of ignorance, it has got somehow associated with the body-mind complex. Just to give an example, suppose I am standing in front of a mountain and I shout out my name. The name is echoed back. I may be deluded by thinking someone is calling me from the mountain, but actually it is just the echo. Similarly, the self, which is the inmost core of our being, is constantly asserting that you are infinite. There is no death for you, and there is no want. You are ever fulfilled. This is the two basic things. In our life, we find that there is something called death, and there is always want. I want this, I want that. But they're saying the core of your being, the real self, is beyond all want. It is ever fulfilled. It is in bliss, and it is eternal. Now this self is constantly asserting that I am eternal, I am ever fulfilled. And this is echoed back from the body-mind complex, deluding me that yes, that this something within me is constantly saying that I am eternal and ever fulfilled. And I get deluded. How do I get deluded? I try to realize that eternity and fulfillment through the body-mind complex. Because from there the echo is coming. And out of delusion I think, oh, this body-mind complex has to be eternal, has to be ever fulfilled. And as a result, from this sense, that always the sense of limitlessness comes. When I find in my life that I have disease, death, I am bound to think of an existence which is beyond disease, which is beyond death. In all the traditions, you will find the idea of this touchstone is there, Parashmani, by the touch of which I become eternal. So from where these ideas have developed? Because something within us inherent is always there, which says that you are eternal. I am ever fulfilled. We always want to have some character so strong that no limitations of life in any way can restrict it. It is beyond all. And this creates that sense of awe. You will find it is something inherent in us, even a small child. However, I may try to develop his rationality, that in this life don't believe in all those superstitions. Always be rational. Sometimes even we don't teach them our own Puranas, our scriptures, because it is full of mythological stories which doesn't appeal to our reason. And that's why we say there's not important for the child. But in the meantime, you will find that these cartoon movies have been developed. Those who have developed the cartoon movies, they know that how the child's mind works. And you will find that the child, in spite of the fact that you are trying to develop rationality in him, he comes back from the school, throws his school bag, opens the screen, and he gets totally absorbed. His eyes won't wink also. So absorbed is in all those cartoon characters. Why? Because again the same thing, sa anantaya kalpate. Through all those characters, that sense of limitlessness is working within. So when we become very bored with our day-to-day life, those who are working or even those who are doing a household work, at last they feel we need some change. We need some change. And you spend some money, and then where you go at last? You will find at last of spending all our money, we have went either to some mountainous track or to some ocean, near the ocean. That's where we all go. Why? Again, that limitlessness, the tires of the peaks, the ocean reaching the horizon as if it has no end. That's the thing which creates a tremendous sense of awe. If that awe is not nurtured, then it may take some perversion. Know it for certain. You will find there's that funny story we say always, that when Swami Vivekananda was delivering lecture in the West, he was speaking of Advaita Vedanta, of the self, that consciousness principle alone is permeating the entire existence. Someone stood up from the audience and said that you are speaking of consciousness as the ultimate principle, but after all you worship idols. You are all idol worshippers. And then Swami Vivekananda went near that person, being interrupted during his lecture. He said, "But sir, you are also idol worshipper." Well, so how come? We don't worship idols. Well, why? Then Swamiji he just joked with that person. He's saying, "Why, you young man, won't you kneel down in front of a young lady and say you're the angel?" That a person, flesh and bones, with all its limitations, with all the all the disagreeable things, this blood, film and all the things in this body, there you are seeing some angel. Isn't it an idolatry? So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. Why you don't kneel down in front of a young lady and say you are an angel? Isn't it an idolatry? What he's saying is that again the same thing, that all faculty, when we reach our adolescence, we will find that all faculty do find expression in the form of that infatuation, and which can lead the life astray. There is no need to explain that. We all know. That's why the parents become so concerned when these children are growing, because that our faculty is very finding expression through this infatuation, sensual infatuation, or it may be very destructive. Even recently in India, that we find that this great discussion is going on, that previously it was thought that those who are from the poor family, it is very easy to lure them with money and go for some terrorist acts, that where they are ready to even give away their lives, but they have been lured by the money that yes, even if you die, your family will be taken care of. But now it has been found that it is a very wrong notion. The so-called, all those terrorists, those who are really in the high rung of this terrorism, they're all highly qualified. The doctors, engineers, lawyers, they are resorting to this sort of terrorism. Why? There's an ideal behind it. What? That this life is not the end of everything. After that you will continue to live. And that life is going to be really blissful. How? That if for such and such ideal you resort to such destruction, that will lead you there. So what is actually again working? That same awe faculty. Sah anantaya kalpate. I can never think of this limitation. And that's the thing which is finding expression either as infatuation or all those destructive tendencies. So here comes the qualitative aspect of devotion. We can use the devotion, the same devotion, in such a way that it can make us a treasure among the human being, full of love, compassion. Who is more compassionate than Jesus, than Buddha? And we will find that their awe faculty has been used in a way which has taken them to that highest spiritual realization. Jesus, the Son of God, is all these spiritual illuminaries, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They all have used that same awe faculty in a very positive way, so that it has constructed that life. And that again speaks of the quality. So this quality, this which has been spoken, this we have Parama Prema Rupa, that we were saying that it is a supreme love for the divine. That supreme speaks of quantitative and qualitative aspect of the divinity which is supreme. It is very intense, and this love is for something which transcends all the limitations of our physical existence, and it can lead us to a plane of awareness where we find that all the negativities of the life has been cleansed, has been removed, and we can become the best specimen of the human being through that devotion. So that it speaks of the quality. So both the quantity and the quality, that indicates the parama prema, the highest quantity. And this is again the next sutra, what he speaks this after saying that he is parama prema rupa satu asmin, and then he's saying it is amrita rupacha. The devotion is the nature of immortality. That God is infinite bliss. There's a metamorphical interpretation of it is God is infinite bliss. He is constantly pulling us towards Him. That's the meaning of the word Krishna. This is the one who is constantly pulling us. It is not that we want to attain God. It is God who is constantly is constantly aspiring to have union with His devotees. So that inner call is something which never dies. It is there always. Maybe we may at the present, because of our entanglements of life, and we cannot hear it, but the call is still there. God is Amrita Rupa. He is eternally present as the core of our being, calling us back to the source. We may not hear it because of our entanglements, but it is there. So we don't feel that attraction because we are clutching through the tree of samsara. So we can understand this with an example, that to attain the divine is something very natural. It doesn't need any effort as such. Once our clinging to this world falls off, immediately we are in eternal companionship with the divine. To give an example, suppose we have climbed up a tree and we are clinging to a branch, to its branch. Now to fall, no effort is required. You just leave the hold of the branch, the gravity pulls you down. There is no need of any effort. The gravity simply, just you leave the hold, it brings you down. The gravity is there always. Similarly, the love of God is there always. That's His grace. That in this samsara vriksha, when in Bhagavad Gita it has been spoken of as the inverted tree, urdhva mula adha shakha. Here in this tree, the source is on the top. That's the spiritual source. And the branches are below. This is the branches of this world, of this samsara. And we are holding on to that. If somehow we can release that, immediately the love of God, the grace, acting as the grace, it takes us to our original source. But as long as we are holding, we are clinging, the God's, that eternal call, this eternal pull cannot help us. So it's Amrita Rupa means that it is not something we have to acquire. It is already there as the kripa, as the grace of the Lord. It is always there, that pull. It is only we have to cleanse the mind, get rid of our worldly entanglements, and immediately we feel that love of the God. So that way it is Amrita Rupa. Even for a moment, if we can give our entire mind to God, our hold is released and we are in the lap of God. That even in the last class we were saying that just for a moment, that spirituality comes in a flash. Even just for a moment, really if we can give our entire mind to God, immediately we are liberated. All our spiritual practice is for that. Just to give our entire mind to God for a moment. And that happens only when we leave the hold, the clutches of this samsara. And I can say, God, I am yours. He immediately can take us out from this quagmire of worldly existence. So that eternal, in metamorphical sense, that is eternal pull is always there. Now, in a psychological interpretation of it, that Amrita Rupa, what it speaks of. So now, it speaks of the focus that which we are speaking, that through resolution, I have started practicing, and this practice has taken me to a state of flow, spontaneity. that my little love, when I have nurtured it with my will, with my resolution, through repeated practice, I have created a path in the mind, and once the path is created, the love has become spontaneous. It speaks of the spontaneity. It speaks of a flow. And once that flow ensues, what happens? All other things starts falling off. You will find in our day-to-day life that when you are doing something in a very focused way, other things falls off naturally. Some example which we give again and again. Suppose a surgeon is standing in a bus stop. He has to catch a bus. And most probably the bus or the train is a bit delayed. And he starts feel uneasy. Most probably that he senses some ache in his leg, in his joints. And the same person that who most probably for half an hour had to stand and he was feeling that ache, when he is in the operation theatre performing some surgery on a patient, maybe it's a very complicated case, for 8 hours the operation is going on. And you find the surgeon is not at all tired as long as the procedure is going on. He forgets his thirst, his hunger, his tiredness. He's fully focused in what he's doing. Why? From where he got that focus? From a necessity. What's the necessity? That if I am careless even for a moment, it may be at the cost of the life of the patient. It has to be very precise. The surgeon with his knife in his hand has to be very precise. A little carelessness will be at the cost of the life of the patient. This necessity gives the focus, and that focus enters in a state of flow, where everything has fallen off. It happens with a musician practicing music, classical music, for hours together. He forgets everything, hunger, thirst, everything. So in the spiritual life, now you can relate that through repeated practice, when I have entered into a state of flow, I have developed that spontaneous devotion. Then what happens? The spontaneous devotion makes my mind extremely focused. I am constantly thinking of God. And then other things starts falling off. All these other factors starts falling off. Now it's a very interesting thing. What binds us to this physical plane of existence? It's all this need for food, sleep, procreation. In the subtle body, we can never have these needs fulfilled. It has to be done to the gross body. So after a person dies, that we believe in reincarnation, what brings us down, drags us down to this physical plane of existence? Our need for food, that is hunger, thirst, need to procreate. And for all these are the one needs which drags us down again to this physical plane of existence. Now think of a devotee who has entered into that state of flow. He stays for hours together, for a long duration, just thinking of the divine, nothing else. As his thought is so intense, and his mind when mind is very focused, it remains focused in the object of its concentration, and other things are bound to fall off. The other things has fallen off. And that becomes a spontaneous state of his existence. He remains absorbed in God. You will find in the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the life of Ramakrishna, that they forget to take food. They forget the need for need for taking care of the body. The others have to be there to take care of their body because they are so much absorbed in the thought of the divine. When such is the state, when the body falls off, the mind remains in the state of contemplation through devotion with the divine. The other bodily needs, they are no more taken care of by the mind. They have all fallen off. So there is no such factor which can drag us down to the physical plane of existence. And that's the idea of various lokas, the Golaka And we find in the Vaishnava Sastra, the Kailasha, in the Shaiva literature, all these ideas that once a devotee dies, he reaches that higher plane of existence where he remains in that state with a union with the union with the divine through devotion. That union is through devotion. This is the idea we find in all the Bhakti Shastras, in all the this religions, dualistic religion. So what's the idea? Here your love has become Amrita Rupa, infinite. It is not going to die anymore. Because it's not based on some small physical needs. It's based on the contemplation of the divine, which continues in your mind without the need to come down to the physical plane of existence. And that entails in your this elevation, ascendance to a plane of existence where you go on contemplating on the divine through love without the need to come back to this physical plane of existence. And thus this bhakti, when it matures, it leads you to that immortality which never breaks, which there is no question of the interruption of that love. So that's the idea of the Amrita Rupa, which has been spoken of in the third sutra. So this second sutra and the third sutra speaks of that highest spiritual evolution. How to attain that? That also we try to have an idea, which has been spoken of here. Now, through the various sutras, as we will take up again this in the succeeding classes, we will find that how the Bhakti the scriptures, Narada Bhakti Sutra, is giving us the guidelines to develop that type of love which becomes Amrita Rupa and which becomes Param, supreme, that intense love, both qualitative and quantitative, and which is without break, which speaks of that eternity established through eternity in that type of love, which entails us in that eternal companionship with the divine, and that companionship is through devotion. So that will be dealt with in the succeeding sutras as we proceed through the Narada Bhakti Sutras. So with this, we stop our discussion today. We will continue with the discussion of the succeeding sutras again in the next class. So thank you all. Namaskars.